Before you do, you may want to listen to this. Zillow is out with its breakdown of the hottest major housing markets for 2025. And these answers may surprise you. They surprised me. Here with more on what to expect from the housing market this year, real estate expert Kirsten Jordan. Kirsten, great to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's show our viewers the top 10 cities that made the list. I was surprised by number one. It's going to come up in a second. Tell us about this list. And there it is. Buffalo came in at number one. Were you surprised at all?
I was surprised initially, just like you.
Yeah.
But then when you really think about it right now, the young home buyer or the family or the couple that wants to have kids, everybody's trying to find a way to find affordable housing. And naturally occurring affordable housing really is only in places where those homes are already built and maybe experienced a decline since the beginning of the 20th century, where they had built, people lived there was industry for them to work, and there were jobs. And then as some of those factories left and other things left, maybe they experienced some decline, which means that the homes are more affordable, but there is housing stock. And that's what you see in these three cities. And then obviously with Providence and Chicago, they're close to these more major urban cities where there's real jobs. So Providence is easy to get to Boston. And then with Indianapolis, I personally have friends who moved to Indianapolis from Chicago for affordability. And I was just there, a couple months ago, and it is lovely.
To your point, I have so many friends that moved to Providence and Philadelphia. They become foodie cities. They have great restaurants. You mentioned affordability and being close vicinity to a city, a major city. What other factors go into a list like this?
What we're seeing that I don't think anybody's really talking about is this is a really strong reflection of places that have real seasons, where instead of going to the sand states where everybody moved, it became, now if you look at living in Miami, it's more expensive to live in Miami than it is to live in Manhattan.
Great.
And so between that, the cost of insurance, and potentially if you can't afford insurance or flood insurance or any of that, the replacement cost of your home, because then if you're foregoing insurance and something happens. So I think with these places, people are like, I'll take a snowstorm. I'll take cold, frigid temperatures and maybe a renovation that I have to do to this home, but at least I'm going to spend these median costs of $260,000 or under $500,000 for a home.
Especially with what we're all seeing play out in California. Let's talk about the top three cities specifically. It is Buffalo, it is Indianapolis, it is Providence, Rhode Island. If people are considering these markets, what advice would you give to them?
Number one, I would say you need to really understand how far your dollar can go. You should be really educated on those markets, because the reality is I do not advise getting into a market as a home buyer to flip the home. You really need to think about being there for the long term. The reality is if you're in it, you could still potentially see, I think home prices will go up, but let's say over the next 5 years there's a dip, you need to be in it for the long term. The second thing I would really consider is, what's your appetite for renovation? Most likely, naturally occurring affordable housing is going to involve some renovation. That's just the nature of what it is. Builders who are building new homes, they're still getting a premium for those. So these homes, you have to be ready to do some kind of renovation. And then the last piece is, are you okay with the weather? Because a lot of these places have real seasons.
Oh, I went to school in Buffalo. Yeah, the snow is nothing to mess with there.
Exactly. So that's really what I would really want to say in caution, or just have buyers think about.
No, that's great advice. Let's take a step back. For people who just want to move this year in 2025, what advice would you give them?
Really just depends on where you are in your life as well, because we are seeing, as a New York City real estate agent, I am seeing tons of young professionals move back to New York City because they know to further their career, they need to show up in the office, they need to be there, especially 30s and early 40s, late 20s. It's time to be in the office and make sure that people know that you're there. And we're seeing more and more of that. So it's really a divide. And then as soon as people can afford it, and they in their career where they can say, hey, I'm going to be in 3 days a week, we're definitely seeing them move outside into more suburban areas. And so it's really where you are in your career, because you cannot ignore what it takes to further your career if you do care about it. And then the other part of this is what kind of community can you create? It's not fun to get up and move every few years. No. And so really think about that along with this affordability piece.
You mentioned you think house prices might go up this year. U.S. home sales in 2024 fell to the lowest level since 1995. Why do you think we saw such a drop during that time, Kirsten?
An election year is always difficult, and it was the perfect storm because this election year gave us a whole other level of uncertainty because of the stakes being so high. And the other thing that we saw was we finally had metabolized how high rates have become in the relative last decade, right? We had over a decade of sub 5% mortgage rates, which the last time we saw that was in the 1950s. And that's something that has really pushed the cost and the price of homes in the United States. And I think that buyers have really had to metabolize what that looks like. And the last thing that we've seen is, in general, the cost of owning a home has gone up dramatically because of the cost of insurance and the layering costs of how expensive everything else is in this country. And I really think this was a year where Americans took a step back and they said, where can I live where I can actually afford to enjoy my life? Because we all consume more than we've ever consumed before.
Right.
So we have to keep up with our own consumption habits, and that is expensive. Our Amazon bill, it's there.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the associated costs with owning a home.
Insurance.
Exactly,
alone. Right.
exactly. And I think there was a moment where Americans took a step back and said, this is getting really expensive.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? I might just have to stay put and see how everything shakes out. And there was always this looming idea that the rates were going to come down. And I think what we're seeing is that's probably not going to happen. And so buyers are going to have to metabolize that. And what they're going to do is they are potentially going to go to these places where maybe they can stabilize their insurance costs.
Yeah.
Maybe they believe that they can have more stable cost of living and potentially be less affected by the inflation that could come by the economy getting better if we believe in the fact that the new administration is bringing in these pro-business, pro-building, maybe getting rid of regulations for builders so that they can build more affordable and offer these homes to the public.
Such great insight. Kirsten Jordan, we always enjoy you. Thank you so much for coming on. And a much-needed shift in weather will hopefully provide relief to the people on both coasts as